Gang, this is Marty, and I'm coming to you from Thomasville, Georgia. This is the great snow apocalypse of Nashville, and we are stuck in the deep south. And so I'm recording from their guest room. So that's why it looks a little different behind me. But today we're going to talk about authority and foolishness. And I am going to share my screen and get to it right away. Like we've been saying, we're going through the book Parenting 14 Gospel Principles that can radically change your family by Paul David Tripp. And so today we're going to talk about authority. And it was ironic. I've been talking to my family. Who in our family has the most problem with authority? Like there's something resistant in our nature about authority. And I get to raise my hand that I am that person in our family. There's something about authority that when I'm told what to do, I feel something inside kind of clench, and I want to resist it. And obviously, as I've gotten older, that has subsided a little, but it still is something in my DNA. My firstborn daughter has it too. We just naturally don't trust. We're naturally suspicious. We naturally want to do things our own way and go our own way as well. The authority principle in the book is this: one of the foundational heart issues in the life of every child is authority. Teaching and modeling the protective beauty of authority is one of the foundations of good parenting. So the idea is that authority creates like this umbrella over a child's life that is meant to help them grow and become the kind of person that they need to be. But inside the heart of every person, every child, is this resistance to that same authority. So we might have a toddler who throws fits when we say it's time for bed, or a 4-year-old who hits when we turn off the TV, a second grader who defies any direct request and gets in trouble at school for misbehavior. We might have a middle schooler who acts like we don't exist and cannot be trusted to be home alone. Or a high schooler who won't take the trash out or help with chores, has an attitude of disgust or disdain, but wants the car keys. How many of us relate to any of these at any point in our lives? Oh my goodness. But what do we want? We want peace in our home. We want sweet compliance. We honestly want quick obedience. We want respect. And we just want everybody to get along, please. So what is the central issue? Well, we're going to get down to the heart of the issue, and there is no important heart issue, more important heart issue for every child ever born than the issue of authority. At the heart of the issue is the heart. Your children must learn early that they have been born into a world of authority, and they are not it. They are not the authority. They're born into a structure that makes them, the intention is for them to submit to authority, but they have a natural disdain of it. Central issue: submission to any authority is really unnatural for anyone. Now, there are some who are more compliant than others, but to be told what to do without any kind of input is just really unnatural for someone to want to comply to that. Sin makes me want to do things my own way. Sin convinces me I know a better way. Whether I'm a freshman in high school and I'm thinking about my teachers, or I'm 42 years old and I'm going on a business trip, sin convinces me I know the better way. Sin makes me the center of my own world and puts me on the throne that is meant for God alone. God alone is intended to be on the throne of my life, but when I resist authority, I sit my own behind in that throne. And sin makes me buy into the delusion of self-rule, that if I was just left alone, I would create a better universe by myself. Another central issue is that every child tends to think that being told what to do is a negative thing. Hey, take out the trash. Hey, turn off the TV. It's like everything's this reason to grumble. But it's not intended to be a negative thing at all. And every child wants to write their own moral rules and follow his own life plan. So our battle has two parts. There's the external part of behavior. That's the part that we see. And then there's the internal part of the heart that we don't see, and is the thing that requires transformation that we've learned from other chapters that we in and of ourselves are unable to change. That part of the equation. So battles over when to go to bed, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch on TV are almost always about the heart. Now, I said almost always because it's not always. I mean, sometimes what a child wants to wear, maybe they've got a sensory processing issue and there's things that fit funny, or they've got an issue with what they're eating that it's making them gag. And for us to just say it's just about their heart and maybe about their lack of submission to authority would be taking it too far. And so it's not as simple as saying it's always about the heart, but these kind of battles are typically about the heart. So who will decide how I live? There was a great story in one of the chapters of this little infant who is getting ready for bed. So the parent snuggles and cuddles and sings all the songs and puts the child gently to bed, and the child starts to fall asleep. And as the parent is going out the door, the child starts screaming a blood-curdling scream. And Paul Tripp says, in the unintelligible words, this is what we really hear. Oh, no, you don't. You will not leave. I love you, and I have a wonderful plan for your life. I am the Lord. And that really gets to the seat of the issue, is that, if we're not going to submit to anything or anyone, that means we're not going to submit to God. And so who is on the throne of our life? Well, it's us. And we become little L lords of our own life. We're not the capital L Lord, but we're a little L Lord. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says, and he, Jesus, died for all, that those who might no longer live, for those who live might no longer live for themselves. And so one of the purposes of Jesus coming to earth was to transform us from the inside out so that we might not live according to our own desires and needs, but to live for others. So again, we're still on the central issue. Our children are addicted to the delusion of their own self-rule. They think they know better than everyone. And because of this addiction, they won't submit to the rules of another. They won't confess their wrongs. They won't seek forgiveness. They won't seek forgiveness from God, and they won't seek his help. This whole idea of having a disdain for authority makes us want to turn our back on God. So to reject authority is to reject God, who is authority over all authority and has given you authority over your child. So you're in the middle of this giant tension between your child and God. God has put you in a position of authority, and yet your child is resisting God, and therefore they resist you. So the gospel of Jesus Christ and authority. Your work to establish clear, loving, consistent biblical authority in the lives of your children is doing gospel work. It is at the center of the gospel mission that Christ brought to earth. Exercising ambassadorial authority is doing gospel work. Now that means being an ambassador for Jesus with your child is doing the work of the gospel. Ephesians 6:1-4 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Like it's one of the commandments. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. This commandment gets a promise that it might go well with you and that you might live long in the land. So God's intention, his structure, is for children to live in submission under your authority. And fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So the Lord wants to have authority through the parents. So gospel parenting. So here's the deal. You have no independent or autonomous authority as a parent. You are just not an authority because you're a parent. You're an authority because you have a relationship with Christ and are being an ambassador from him to your children. You are not allowed to parent any way you want. You have ambassador authority to display how beautiful, wise, patient, guiding, protective, rescuing, and forgiving God's authority is. When you parent, you are parenting as if God was parenting. And that's what gets into the mind of a child. So your parenting gives your children a picture of God's authority. So this means you are never to combine discipline with berating, demeaning, and condemning talk. No put downs. You are never to let your anger get out of control and do things that you like pinch or yell or poke or hit, slap, yank, shove. We're not going to become physical with this parenting. Like, when did God ever get physical with you, put you in the headlock or pinch you to make you comply? He woos you, he draws you, he gives you a second chance. You are never to treat your child like a slave to make your life easier. You are never to parent in such a way that you break your parent-child relationship. You know, when you become an unsafe person, you fundamentally start to break the relationship between you and your child. You either make them anxious and afraid or avoidant and afraid, or you disorganize them altogether and they don't even know what to do with you anymore because you're so one way one day and another way another day. But you don't want to parent in a way that breaks the safe and nurturing bond between a parent and a child. You want to be used by God to help your children to begin to believe that submission to authority is where life and freedom are found. That submitting to Christ, submitting to authority is where you actually find the greatest sense of life and to have it abundantly. And that is ultimately bringing your life under the submission and the lordship of Jesus Christ, where you call him Lord and you call him King and you call him Savior. And you say, Lord, I'll do what you want me to do and I'll be who you want me to be. And it's not my will, but it's your will be done. Gospel work is helping your child to understand why they do what they do is doing the gospel work. Establishing authority early in little things is doing the gospel work. Like even when they're first born and you're starting to tell them, no, don't throw your food off the table. That's gospel work, is establishing lines of authority. Exercising consistent authority is doing gospel work. Confessing that when it comes to authority, you are more like your children than unlike them is doing gospel work. I did that just a little while ago. I was with my daughter and we were talking about authority and struggling with authority, and she totally understands what that is. And then I told her, I said, I struggle with authority too, and I think I'm the chief of sinners here. And she just kind of looked at me like, wow, okay. So this changed the whole chemistry of our interaction. She felt like it was a one-sided interrogation, maybe, or a one-sided interview might be a better description. But when I said, no, I'm the same way, then it became like, okay, so we're in this together. It was great. Gospel work, helping your child, talking about the cross of Jesus Christ with your child is doing gospel work. Absolutely. So here's some quotables from the chapter. If your eyes see or your ears hear the sin and weakness of your children that normally would drive us crazy and make us angry and frustrated, it's never an accident. It's never a hassle. It's never an interruption. It's always grace. Children need the security of faithful, consistent, firm, uncompromising, and loving authority that is motivated and tempered by grace. And there's that grace word again, is that when push comes to shove, our kids ought to feel loved. They ought to feel like there's grace just slathered over everything we do. And it's not weird to talk about the gift of the cross of Jesus Christ in moments of discipline. It's just some of us feel like we can't bring that up because we're being harsh with our kids and our kids might be confused. Well, no, we're not supposed to be bringing the harshness to our kids. We're supposed to be bringing the cross and love and grace of Jesus Christ to our kids. It's not weird to talk about the forgiveness and hope of change that the cross provides. And every moment of rebellion reveals a child's heart. Every moment when a child's heart is revealed is a God-given opportunity to talk about the Savior who alone can deliver his child from himself. So that was all about authority, which then connects directly with this whole concept of foolishness. So our children want to go their own way and do their own things, and as a result, they will end up making really poor choices and foolish choices. So the principle is this: the foolishness inside your children is more dangerous to them than the temptation outside of them. Only God's grace has the power to rescue fools. So we think that watching the bad movie is the worst thing, that most dangerous thing that could happen, or that they might have bad friends and that could be the worst thing that could happen. No, it's the foolishness that's underneath that's the worst thing that could happen. So it's all about the heart, right? We're going to go straight for the heart. You are never ever dealing with just words and actions from your children. It's not just words and actions that display that declare this foolishness. You're dealing with the internal motivations of their hearts. Their hearts are bent away from that which is true, which is right, that is godly, that is good. Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. And this is in Proverbs, it's being written from a father to a son. So in other words, he's saying, son, be careful and pay attention to the character and content of your heart. So instead of saying, let's say your child is disobeying and getting on your third nerve, instead of saying, how many times have I told you to do this? You could say, son, I want you to be careful. I want you to pay attention to your heart right now. I want you to listen to your heart, because it is displaying your character. And then let them deal with it. Let them think about it. So the heart, words and behavior flow from it. There's a saying that says all behavior is communication. And when we see foolish behavior, what we know is that it's communicating from a foolish heart. It could be a broken heart that's foolish. It could be a sad heart that's foolish, right? But all behavior is communication. Parents don't like to talk about it. We don't like to talk about the heart. We like to get behavior under control. The heart is something that's kind of mushy. It's theoretical. It's not something that we can easily see. And our children can say, well, you don't know my own heart. You don't know what I'm thinking. But you can just nod your head and go, well, I know more than you think I do. Every moment of discipline and correction must involve the heart. The heart is the thing that we need to be expressing and defining for our children, not just their behavior. And the heart is more teachable at certain times than others. Now, in the book, Paul David Tripp talks about how every moment of discipline is an opportunity to instruct the heart. And I would say, I don't think that's really true. I would say that there are times of discipline and disarray and where there's feelings already energized and the heart is not teachable. That is not the right time to be teaching about the heart. But you might think a couple hours later it might be, or the next day could be a better time. So a teachable heart, moments of instruction and discipline are times to help your children see their own condition from the inside out. There you go. That's Paul David Tripp's methodology. I say this, long trips, morning breakfast, and hanging out can be times to talk about their hearts. It's much easier to talk about their hearts when they're not already in conflict, and if they have a big old breakfast sandwich in their hands. And the goal is to have children see themselves, admit their struggle, confess their sin, and reach out for God's help. Now, let me tell you, I have rarely seen or heard these kind of things as a parent in front of them. Most of the time, they do a lot of the business with God and with their heart by themselves. But it's a beautiful thing when you do have a child who says, Dad, you're right. I made a mistake. I mean, that's gold. That's just golden all the way. You can't make that happen over and over again. Ezekiel 36:26 says, I will give you a new heart and a new spirit I will put in you. And I will remove your heart of stone, that hard heart, from your flesh. And I will give you a heart of flesh. I'll give you a heart that feels, that's alive, that senses. This is the kind of heart that God wants for us. He wants to rescue us and transform us from a stony heart to a heart of flesh. So if the heart is the problem, then what is the problem with the heart? So it is dysfunctional from the very beginning. Our hearts are bent away from God. Proverbs 22:15 says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. So let's just take that first part. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. Everybody knows that. A child will go and do the dumbest things ever. And they don't understand why it's dumb or why they should be corrected for it. And so discipline is required for that child, for every child. So what does the fool believe? The fool believes everything that's wrong, that they have the world inside out and upside down. They think right is wrong and wrong is right, that false is true, that true is false. They look for life in the temporal rather than the eternal. And they need God's rescue and parental care while feeling quite happy on the path of destruction and danger. They need our care even though they want us far away. They don't want to be associated with us. And they can get lost. In isolation, people make poor choices. So think about how often your child stays in a room alone or they've got their headphones on. They are isolating themselves. And there's no more conversation when those headphones go on or they go into their room. And I'm telling you, that is a place where they can get on their pathway of destruction and danger. And you don't know it until behavior starts showing you that, oh my goodness, there's something bad going on here. So I would say this is that your part of your parental care is to limit the amount of isolated time and to increase the amount of time that you're actually conversing with your child. So what does a fool believe? At the epicenter of his life, the fool has a deeply theological issue that parents find elusive. He lives a life that denies the existence of God. Remember how we talked about how, like a few chapters ago, is that how do you see the existence of God? What in this world makes you think that God exists? And then how can you translate that to your children? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Our children can look at the sun, moon, and stars, and they don't see a creator. Our children can feel love, and they can feel kindness and goodness and gratefulness and self-control, and they don't think that any of that comes from God. They think it's all just happenstance. It takes you to be the one to call it out and to see it. So this is much more natural, this idea of denying God's existence than humbly acknowledging God's existence and authority and submitting to his holy demands. It takes a transformation to see the world through God's eyes. So how do you parent a fool? The only hope for a fool is God's amazing, rescuing, forgiving, transforming, and delivering grace. God's Spirit needs to be involved, and you can be asking his Spirit to work on your child's life, that your prayers ought to be centered on asking God to woo and draw your children to himself, to be a representative of God's holy authority and his redeeming grace. Just in every interaction that you have, you understand that you're representing God to your children. So there's 4 different segments to this how to parent a fool segment or part of the chapter: glory, wisdom, story, and welcome. Under glory, the solution to your child's addiction to his own glory is to introduce him to and blow him away with a greater glory. Let him see himself as being minute and minuscule and nothing but like a fleck, a piece of sand on the grain of the earth that God created with just his words. And let them be blown away with how big he is and how small they are, but what sacrifice that God gave for them. So with wisdom, every day, God will give you opportunities to show how beautiful, protective, practical, and helpful and good is God's wisdom, that it really is. So like, who wouldn't want to live in a world where everyone was kind, loving, humble, patient, giving, and serving? I mean, all the scripture indicates a world that we would all want to live in. And yet our children will so often want to go the other way. And so we get to be the ones to call it out. And then the story of God. Tell the story of the person and work of Jesus Christ over and over again. Tell it in third person. Read it from the Bible. Tell Bible stories. Tell it in first person. Tell your children how God has changed you, How did you meet God? How does God meet you still? And what is he doing in your life and your heart right now? Bring that to the supper table so that your children know that, oh, it's not just the God of Abraham, this old thing with old stories, but it's the God of you, and that he is moving you to action, and that they find that there's a hope in that story. And you can make it personal to today. Whatever kind of issues you're dealing with, whether it's at work or in the world, you can say, I was struggling with this, but God spoke to my heart, and this is the way I'm processing this. And our children will love to hear those stories. They will be changed by those stories. And then there's the welcome. And that is like the prodigal son. God is always welcoming his children home. Our children need to know that no matter what they do and how far away they go, God is always has welcome arms, and so do we. No matter what the child has done, God is always extending his forgiving grace and unconditional love. And so will we. He's always the God of a second chance, and so are we. So in summary, parenting is always about the heart. Sorry about the typo there. So last slide here. Are you willing to start with your own heart? Do you have unrealistic expectations? Are you being a good steward and ambassador of God's love, grace, and authority to your children as a parent? So are you willing to lay aside anger and lay aside hurt feelings and not to take things personally, and to align your own deep motivations with God, so that you don't see the interruptions of having to deal with poor behavior as interruptions, but as opportunities? And are you open to being transformed as you work to transform others? Are you willing to let God transform you from the inside out? And that is the invitation for all of us that Paul Tripp keeps bringing to us chapter after chapter. And are you willing to extend the hands of grace over and over again to your children? That is the conclusion. That is the conclusion of our message here today. And so we're going to go ahead and stop this, and Allison and I will come on with another video, kind of going through some scenarios, and then you'll break into your small groups. Love y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.